The king ran to the enemy territory all the way from A8 to H8. It scurries across the board, wins Hikaru the game, and as I said, he was displeased because he missed an earlier queen trade that would have won him the game without so much complication.
And it's crazy that all of that could be avoided, but what's going to get lost in all of that brouhaha, Robert, is the fact that Hikaru even created these chances in the first place, because once they got into the queen and knight versus queen and knight endgame, I was convinced that it was a dead draw. I mean, it looked as lifeless as, I don't know, name something that's lifeless, but Charlotte past 9 p.m. But in any case, Hikaru creating chances, just a vintage Nakamura victory, even if it's sloppier than he would like.
How are we still in the longest time control, right? We still have so much chess to go. Both these players giving their entire sense of self, their entire effort, and right now it is a 2-point match. Hikaru Nakamura leads, but he needs to remain composed, and right now it's even. There's no problem in his position, but you could just see that something about that last game bothered him a lot. And look at this. Now it's an advantage for white. It just looks like a pleasant position for Nihal.
It most certainly does. This is the final game of the 5-minute portion, and if he can win and renew that momentum that he built up with such hard work with his only victory of the match, it would go a very long way. Nihal, listen, he's gotten exactly what he wants. He's gotten all he can eat with the white pieces.
Was there bishop c7 instead of knight takes b6 there? Probably not.
Oh my
but
God.
It looks cool.
That was a sick move. With queen takes b7, trying to fork back the minor pieces.
Yeah, I don't know if it worked, but I was just trying to come up with something. Whoa, what is this?
Committal chess by Nakamura. Look at his center. It's under fire.
He is leaving that bishop on g3 in the dust. That bishop is blunted by the pawn on e5, but at some point, white might play d4 and just spring that bishop back to life.
And at some point, might be now, it might be a little bit later. Nihal likes to play h3 in these types of positions. Let's see what he comes up with. Maybe rook c5.
There's d4. Now. Yeah, very good move. Let's get that bishop in open space. And e4 doesn't look right. E takes d4, knight takes d4. The problem is the c file will open up. That is very bad news for Hikaru.
It most certainly is. And maybe you can try to stick a knight on c4, but that is not a stable knight because the pawn from b2 can move up to b3 once the queen leaves the b3 square. White undoubtedly better here. And Nihal, this is crucial for him to capitalize on.
And once again, he is up nearly a minute on the clock. It hasn't really been put into anything, right? He hasn't put it to good use, it feels like. But it is something to note, especially in a position like this. And now knight d4, the trade has happened. It may look like not too much has changed, but the open c-file is now white for the taking.
And that c-file has a lot of juice to be squeezed from it. The rook, if it lands on c7, introduces just complete discord in black's position. A4 by Nihal. What a mature move. What he wants is to move the queen away and play b3 so that the a-pawn isn't hanging. This is a common technique, Robert, when you're trying to get a knight off of f5. You play h5 and then g6. He's doing it on the other side of the board.
He did that earlier in the match, in fact. And right now, he can bring the queen up to b5 to attack the tender pawn on d5 and try to go b3. But watch out for knight forks. If your queen's on b5, then there's knight a3 fork. So you need to put your queen on the right square. It could be a2. I know we don't like going passive, but the key is to kick that knight out of c4. That's going to happen sooner rather than later.
But you made a great point in the last game. Nihal doesn't mind making retreating moves. He played knight b8. I think he won't hesitate to play a move like queen a2 if the position demands it, and the position might be demanding it.
I think we're demanding it, but queen to c3 is also available. But then there's knight d6 to e4, things of that nature. So I like queen a2 because it doesn't allow knight d6. So the queen takes d5 would happen with check. Give me that free pawn. So gift me the pawn, as somebody might say.
Well, after knight d6, you could play queen takes d5 check. Or, Robert, you could drop the queen to a3. And this reminds me of the time that Robert Hubner was playing a tournament in the last Boys Open in 1984. b3, knight a5, bishop c7. Uh-oh.
This is a big problem. Now you can even trade on d6 at some point. Rook c7 first. If rook d4, take on d6, take on b7, double your rooks on the 7th rank, threaten checkmate on the last rank as well. This is really bad for Hikaru. I'm surprised it's only 0.7 right now.
It's been a pretty one-sided game. I'm as shocked as you are. That endgame looks totally lost because rook c8 is a mate threat. Hikaru trying to MacGyver something here with his knight.
But you can play multiple. Bishop c7, for example, and then just take on a7.
Uh-oh.
You can play rook c1 to c7. Doesn't look so bad either.
Yeah, but bishop c7, rook c8 pins the bishop, and then rook takes a7. I'm going to try to go rook b4 and quickly knight d4. He takes immediately. Well, no.
And plays rook b4.
And he's got to pass d-pawn. Let's not forget about that.
But rook c3, d4, rook d3, can you just sit and blockade the pawn?
You can, and I think he will, because rook c7, the effectiveness of that is greatly diminished. This knight, Robert, is a massive defensive piece.
It is, for sure. So rook c3, knight d4 is a potential follow-up, but then rook c3 to c7, and g7 is loose, and that's a big problem.
There's another weird idea, which is just to push the a-pawn and then put the other rook behind it and basically guide it from two different directions. You got one guy below, you got one guy above, and that pawn cannot really be stopped. Of course, black will push his d-pawn, but the bishop can stop it from f4. Complicated idea. Nihal goes simple with rook c3.
And I think it's a good pragmatic choice. Remember, when we pulled up the Nihal Sarin card, his biggest strength is that he is pragmatic. He just says, I'm going to blockade the d-pawn while protecting the b-pawn. And what's the problem with a5? Is h4 really that threatening? The bishop can always slide up to c7, and the king will still have luft on h2.
I don't see an alternative. I think you got to push him baby here if you're Nihal. a5, there is this weird move, knight d4, threatening two forks at once. So maybe that's what's giving him pause. But rook c7 in that position would have escaped both of them at the same time. Instead, he starts with rook d3, paving the way, Robert, for bishop c7.
Like right now?
Well, then rook d7.
Then bishop to a5, potentially.
Oh, forcing the rook trade. And I have rook takes b3.
But there's rook a8 check. So, like, you have all these intermezzo moves. Yeah, you know.
That was
my tactical Wheaties this morning with bishop. Look at this.
Yeah.
This is what I love about Nihal. He plays rook d3 instead of a more forcing move like pushing your past pawn or bishop c7. He's, as you're highlighting, bishop d2, b4, even g4 to kick the knight away from both the defensive d4 and the g7 pawn. I love the way he's playing this game, and I think that he's completely winning right now.
He's totally winning. Bishop d2, b4. And what's so debilitating if you're Hikaru is how easy it is to play with white in the next couple of moves. The path is so clear. So will Nakamura find some way to complicate the game, use his d-pawn? I don't see it. Bishop d2 coming to a theater near you.
Weird question, but with 20 seconds left, Hikaru's losing this game. Do you want another 5+1 game if you're Hikaru?
I don't think so. I don't think this is lost enough to warrant resignation. Not just yet.
And I feel like Hikaru is so confident in his quicker type controls. Like, he's won how many title Tuesdays at this point that it's not worth, giving up chances in this game. But I was just thinking about that as the match clock. There it is. It hits 0. This is the last game of 5 minute plus 1 second increment chess. And right now, Nihal better win this game if he wants to maintain chances in this match.
Push him, baby. Rock him, cowboy. b4 is coming, but Nihal hesitating here. I think he's also weighing the option of trying to go after the d4 pawn. I don't think he should get waylaid by this pawn because the rook on d3 is doing a perfect job of restraining it, of keeping the third rank in order. And here comes Johnny.
What's wrong with b5 now? I mean, what is black's threat? I don't see a single threat.
No, he's just playing passive. Rook takes b5. Oh.
We've created one threat. We see it now.
Maybe rook a6 and then snake up the pawns with b6 and a5.
There's also rook a5 because the bishop on d2 defends it, and you're threatening b6 with the knight on f5 being loose.
That's some very sharp tactical vision, x-raying the knight.
Because one thing you want is after rook a5, you want black to play g6. Because then you could put your rook back on a7 and threaten back rank checkmates when you cut the king off. So I feel like inducing that g-pawn forward would be a good thing. So rook a5, bishop protects it, threatens b6. He rushes with g4, but won't that knight plant itself on h4?
Threatening rook takes d2. And don't forget about the simultaneous threat of rook takes b5. I think Nihal has just given Hikaru his first inkling of counterplay.
Wait,
and
rook
he's blundered rook takes b5. He's blundered rook takes b5, ab, rook takes h7, and then you can't even take d4. He wants bishop g3 in that position.
Exactly that. He wants bishop g3, kicking the knight back, then he'll take on d4. And I guess he thought this position would be winning, but we see the evaluation bar say, no. This is actually a position that black can hold with proper play.
And I think what he's missed, and perhaps what's giving him cold feet right now, is that in that resulting position, black's remaining rook can get behind the pawn with a check on the first rank. Nihal cannot afford to let this game slip, Robert.
And I think it is slipping through his fingers. Hikaru Nakamura, the wily veteran, he does not go down without a fight. And right now, he's ahead by almost a minute on the clock. He now has made his disadvantage only one pawn, but it's not going to be that easy. Even after rook takes d4 and just parking the rook on d5, white will keep that extra pawn.
And you don't want to rush rook a1 check, because then White would have refrained from rook takes d4 and put his own rook behind the pawn. Hikaru doing things in the right order. Rook d5 keeps the pawn alive. But how are you going to make progress? Black's rook is on an optimal square.
Okay, he's going to rook to b8 instead, just defending the rook from the pawn, from the front. Ooh, I don't know if I like king h7. Why didn't he go to f7?
Yeah, weird move. And now the rook drops back to d5. Bishop c7 and b6, Robert, is a massive threat.
And the big thing is knight e7, rook d7. The knight has to move again because the king isn't defending it. So bishop c7 right now.
Knight h4 check is a paper tiger. King drops back to f1. There are no forks.
The king just wants the center, where it wants to be anyway.
b6 is actually a threat because there's an intermezzo check on h5 in the event of rook takes b6.
Wow. Okay, so this is a big moment for Hikaru. King to g8. Then you're just going to bring your king to where it belongs anyway, but b6 happens fast. Now, the pawn can't get to b7 easily. That's the good news for Hikaru. But the king is getting to the center. What's wrong with king e2?
Well, what's wrong with b6?
There's rook takes b5, king e2.
Oh, gosh, and Nihal walking on hot coals, but he's avoiding the landmines thus far. And Hikaru's clock is dropping. Maybe knight e5 here should be considered.
Knight e5, maybe g5. He goes knight to g5 instead. What about king e2, knight e4, trying to fork on c3? I get it. Rook d7, what's your idea?
Yeah, rook d7 is such a nice stabilizing move.
And getting away from all knight checks. That's important. Knights are such tricky pieces.
And the king can join the action with king c2. That rook is not stable on the b file where it has to remain to keep the b pawn restrained.
f4, please. f5 check.
Great move. God, Nihal just piling it on here.
f5. Where's the knight going?
Nowhere. It doesn't have any good squares. It's got to go back to f8 or banish to g5.
But
it should be over.
It's out of play. King c2 wins. Knight takes c7 loses on the spot because bc. So here's king c2, and this should be over. King c3.
But how do you actually make that final bit of
c4,
progress? And rook b5?
Exactly. Whoa.
Repeating wants to gain some time.
5 seconds for Nihal. 6.8 for Hikaru.
Oh!
Wait. No, he's going to go rook b3.
Winning.
Still winning.
But Hikaru's making it to d7!
Oh my gosh, what did he do? What did he just do?
He traded rooks at exactly the wrong moment. Hikaru might have a fortress.
Oh, the king's going to h5. The king is trying to go king f4.
No. Knight h6. He blundered again.
Oh my goodness, Nihal.
That was inexcusable.
I cannot believe it. He's such a good bullet player.
He just had and he's actually the one who has to make the draw by getting rid of the last pawn.
Oh my gosh. If we bring up in that earlier position.
Oh my gosh.
He put his king in the wrong direction.
And in this position, it still looks, and don't quote me on this, I think it is winning if you go king f4, then you go king g3, king h4, king h5. Now, black can try to hold on with knight h8, but then you give up your pawn in timely fashion, you go around and you vacuum up the rest of the pawns, which are on dark squares permanently. If knight e5, the pawn ending is also winning because you create an unstoppable passer. Robert, this is basic Betty for someone like Nihal, and instead, where is he going? The freeway is closed, and he blunders g4.